Great to have your company once again on the marketplace. It's been a pretty significant 24 hours as far as options are for those who are taken, those who have opted not to take them, and clubs who have made decisions on the future of some players as well. Of course, it all builds to Friday when free agency officially opens and the marketplace is where you need to be. We've got a live show happening. We've got all the latest news and information between now and then. I'm Jack Heverin. Pete Hooley, great to see you. You piled through the list and there's a couple of interesting ones. Jack White opting out, no doubt, is the biggest surprise.
Yeah, it is. And I guess a lot of people thought anytime you see a player option, normally any one time someone opts out, they have some sort of agreement already in place, whether that's an NBA deal or EuroLeague deal. They have something else they're already going to, or they're probably going to re-sign for a significant increase, whether that's security, a long-term, or more financial options in that deal. So for his decline to say he's now exploring overseas, I think it came as a shock to a lot of people because we spoke about the last 2 episodes of Marketplace. Jack White has a player option. You fully expect him to be picking that one up and running it back with Melbourne United. There is still the option on the table that has been reported that he will explore overseas, and then there's still the be open to returning to Melbourne. So maybe that is a long-term deal if he can't find a potential situation overseas that interests him. But yeah, what a way to start free agency.
It's not what we were expecting, I must admit, when the notifications came through. So just keep this really simple, Pete, from a Melbourne United fan base perspective. Will they see him playing for Melbourne United next season? What would you say in terms of likely versus unlikely?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think he's someone who's always wanted to explore overseas. We know he's had his moments in the NBA. He's an NBA championship winner with Denver, and he's always had those little stints where he's close enough to being rewarded with a more permanent situation in the States. So whether it's in the States he's looking at or Europe or overseas, maybe it's in Japan, he's going to have all those certain options to weigh up. I wouldn't rule it out. I know he's declined it, but I wouldn't rule it out. I think it's just the timing of where he's at in his career where he understands, you know what, let me see if there's anything else out there that interests me. And if there's nothing that jumps off the table, his goal is to get back to the NBA. So if there's nothing that jumps off the table, one, to help that, or it's a massive financial increase, I wouldn't be shocked if we're sitting here in a few months' time and then he's renegotiated a long-term deal to come back to Melbourne. So if you're Melbourne United, I wouldn't be too nervous about it. But again, if he does go on and leave, you saw his quote. He said Melbourne United will always be home for him in the NBL.
Yeah, normally in this situation, the follow-up question would be, does that mean that he's gettable for other teams? But it probably doesn't feel like that, as you say. So I guess the final one on this, Pete, is how do Melbourne United approach this? Are they attacking free agency to plan for Jack White or to plan to not have Jack White?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? You've got 2 ways to think about it. You can kind of go in and say, we fully support you, which they have. You can go over there and survey your options, see where you want to potentially end up, and we'll be here if you want. But we saw Tasmania do this with Jack McVeigh, where if you're holding on to hope that they might return, if you wait too long, then you can miss out on some key pieces, and it can really delay your start to the season, and you'll start to build this puzzle piece of a championship contender. So there's 2 ways that Melbourne can look at it. They can basically go and say, hey, we understand what you're doing, but it's our business as well to go. And if someone pops up in that same position and we're interested in, that might change things a little bit. And that's why if you're another NBL club, you can still pick up the phone and see what would it take. If you are considering coming back to the NBL later this year before NBL 26, what would it take to potentially get your services across? Because I know it's been very highlighted, the recency bias in the struggles from the free throw line, the inconsistencies in the championship series. But Jack White at his very best is one of the best power forwards in this league. We've seen it. We've seen it this season. We saw it in Game 3. He had 20 points in Illawarra to help secure the victory. He had those ups and downs between the years that were well documented, but now he gets a chance to figure out what's next for him. I think he's going to find himself in the perfect position that helps him continue to grow his career. But as you said, if you're Melbourne United fans, don't be surprised if he does end up back in Melbourne, but also if he leaves, understanding that you'll be in a good position anyway.
Just sticking with Melbourne United, Okwera Lee is one name that won't be having his option renewed. The other is Flynn Cameron. This is probably not a total surprise, Pete. You dive down into the depth charts deeper than anyone. They are pretty loaded at the guard position, regardless of what happens with Matthew Dellavedova. It probably makes sense now for Flynn Cameron to explore a better opportunity, doesn't it?
It does. This was something we, I think, all did expect. And now there was always the talk of what happens with Delhi will decide what happens with Flynn Cameron. If Matthew Dellavedova does not return to Melbourne United, if he signs elsewhere, then, okay, there's more opportunity there for Flynn Cameron. But you're looking at now, Melbourne United have Dash Daniels locked in as the next star, and he's going to continue to grow his opportunity towards the draft. He's an unbelievable prospect. Where he's at in his career is very different to Flynn Cameron, who's, I think, 7-8 years older than Dash Daniels. So if you are Flynn Cameron, who, by the way, has improved immensely under Dean Vickerman, being involved in the United program, learning every single day from Delhi, Chris Golding, Shayley, Ian Clark. So there's no doubt that this situation's been perfect for him. But now we talked about in the Championship Series, he was a bit of a caged animal where he's just waiting for the opportunity to break out. And now he will likely get that. And the main one that everyone's talking about, it does look like everything's trying to line up with him returning to the New Zealand Breakers, returning home. New ownership, New Zealand flavour. They're talking about bringing the Kiwis back. He seems like the perfect piece to bring back in, long-term deal, and say, hey, we're going to continue to have this as our foundation, because he's an exciting prospect.
Yeah, he'd be a great fit. You and I are both enormous on Flynn Cameron, so he'd be a fantastic pickup for any team who gets a hold of him. Staying with the Melbourne-based team for a second, Southeast Melbourne Phoenix have taken up the option on Nathan Sobey. I mean, he's an interesting one, Pete. There was always a bit of a question mark, but it feels like by about halfway through the season, Josh King and Nathan Sobey had kind of worked out how to work together. Would that be fair?
Yeah, for sure. This is something that I fully expected. I mean, speaking to the Phoenix, speaking to Josh King for the last few months, was under the impression this was going to be inevitable, that Nathan Sobey would be back. They'd be picking up the option, running it back. And again, it's the right core. So Josh King can still have his full imprint on this roster. We know he's going to bring in his own flavour coach as well. But you've got Angus Glover, you've got Geordie Hunter, you've got Nathan Sobey. You have this exciting core now to help put these complementary pieces around and to build something special. They were one game away from a championship series, a team that started 0-5. There's no need to tear it all up and start from scratch. You're in a nice position. We saw that Nathan Sobey and Josh King, they figured each other out, which again, you got to give a lot of credit to both coach and player to do that on the fly when the club was struggling 0-5, all the changes, to get that chemistry between star guard and head coach, who's just coming in, the third new voice in the season. It takes a lot of credit to both players to be able to get that done. So that wasn't surprising for me, and now Josh King can have his full imprint on his team.
I love that. It's a great call. To the Perth Wildcats, Elijah Pepper being picked up as returning to the Wildcats next season. I know, Pete, that we didn't see a lot of him in the back end of the season, but the Red Army, if you're just judging by the way they talk about Elijah Pepper, I think they're excited to see what's to come.
Yeah, and this one made sense too. I mean, you talk about the logjam with guards at Melbourne United, similar for the Perth Wildcats. Obviously, Bryce Cotton's going to be playing 40 minutes a game last season. Ben Henschel was outstanding. Ty Webster came back. You needed some sort of veteran experience in the playoffs to try and get that done in the back end of the regular season. So it makes sense now to be picking that up and giving more of a responsibility to a young guard like Elijah Pepper. We saw him playing the Boomers window. He's not afraid to shoot the ball. He's not afraid to score the ball. They're going to need a bit more of that now without Bryce Cotton coming back. And with Ben Henschel likely to be overseas, exploring the draft, exploring the pre-draft workouts, you at least have this local Australian foundation piece to continue to build around. And it's a great decision for both parts.
However, David Okwera won't be returning to the Perth Wildcats. Now, he's an intriguing prospect, Pete. We saw him come to Melbourne United at a young age. He went back to Western Australia to play with the Wildcats. Never really got the opportunity. What happens next for David Okwera? Who should be looking at him, do you think?
It's probably not the worst time to become a free agent for him. If you actually look at the games where John really started him and he produced, he was able to go in there and have an impact positively to help the Wildcats. And now he seems in a lot of comments online and people instantly say, well, he's going to be the next Cairns Taipans player who you go there, you get the opportunity, you just flourish with the extra responsibility on the court. That would make sense, but obviously they've got Sam Waardenburg returning, Kyron Galloway, so there's a bit of a logjam there already. But you could see another team potentially picking him up and being that backup forward, or maybe he looks overseas for a couple of years. Again, not surprised they didn't pick it up, but I thought he showed enough in the times that he got the opportunity on the court from Perth that he can help any team in the NBL.
And putting up some good numbers in the NZNBL as well. So we've seen a couple of players that have gone and done that, come back to the NBL. They've come back full of confidence, Ben Henschel being one of them. So keep your eyes on David Okwera. He's a name that will be on the whiteboard on Friday. One name that you can take off the whiteboard at the Illawarra Hawks is Hyunjung Lee. His option has been taken up. Likewise, Luca Yates. The Hawks have opted not to bring Zach Triplett back. But Hyunjung Lee's another who seems to have just found a system that works for him.
Sure has, and again, it's no surprise. Anytime you win a championship, normally those options for key guys and key rotational pieces, which HJ Lee was going to be picked up, and that seems like a no-brainer. Even talking to the Hawks throughout the entire season, yes, you're looking at we have these options for next year. Justin Tatum said option 1A is to bring everybody back. Now that's very unlikely. Normally, when you win, players get rewarded and go elsewhere, but they also have to understand is every team now is trying to get one step better than the Hawks. The Hawks set the bar this year.
Yep.
How do we get one step better than them next year? But I think HJ Lee, we still haven't seen the full impact of what he can do. He's still so young in his professional career, but he's shown immense dominance off the bench in his role. And I think that's probably going to increase a little bit regardless of who they've got around next year. But again, no surprises from me from the Hawks front that they picked that up.
And then let's finish with Cairns. You mentioned earlier in the show that over the course of the weekend, Sam Waardenburg and Kyron Galloway have re-signed, which is fantastic, particularly from a Sam Waardenburg perspective, Pete. It kind of has all the makings of it being Sam Waardenburg's team this season.
It does. And again, a lot of people were trying to push him towards the New Zealand Breakers, say, let's get the Breakers to continue to grow that local core. But from what I understood and from what Olgun was reporting, it did look like it was always leaning towards running it back for one more year with the Cairns Taipans. That's what he signed on for, a 1-year extension. It's not a 2 multi-year deal. He's going to be back there, and you're right, he's going to continue to try and flourish. Still an unnamed head coach, but he's going to have a big part in what kind of team they build around that. And also, I'm not surprised because I do think that New Zealand would have loved to have him back. But you look at kind of a logjam that could potentially be building around the rumours with the New Zealand Breakers. Sam Menenga's already there as a local. They're talking about potentially Finn Delaney if they can bring him back. Yanni Wetzel popped up for a split second at some point in the free agency. Yep. But they're all key local bigs. You can't have them all. I know it would look great on paper, but you can only play 1 or 2 of them at a time. So not surprised that Waardenburg went back for 1 more year. And again, just another year of clean health. I think he can be an absolute star in this competition.
Well, you can add Kyle Adnam to that list as well. His option was taken up by the Cairns Taipans, which is great. A bit of veteran leadership for no doubt what's going to be a very young group as well. And Pete, just a moment on Kyle. I know that you know him really well, but this guy was out of the league, potentially looking at the next phase of his professional life, maybe away from playing basketball as well. And he's got another opportunity at the Taipans. He's a great story and just a nice example of good things happening to good people.
It is, but again, the veteran experience is invaluable. And you look at no matter what, whoever's coaching the Cairns Taipans, then whatever roster they put together, they are going to be very young. They're going to be very inexperienced. That's the small market team, what they have to try and build. And Adam Ford talks about that kind of 3-year build, that 3-year program. They lose a lot of players at times to other clubs, whether it's imports or locals. Look at Keanu Pinder, look at Bull Qual. So to have that veteran experience just around the club, yes, he's had his impact on the court. He can do that, but it's similar in terms of like Jesse Wagstaff going around again for Perth is outstanding. And when he plays 10 minutes a game next year, whether he plays 0, his impact off the court is going to be immense to the success that the Perth Wildcats have. Similar to Kyle Adnam because of how young and inexperienced the Taipans always go. So that's great to see him back. Alex Higgins-Titcher, obviously they're going to run it back with him. He is an exciting prospect, but with all that young core, all the new pieces, they look for diamonds in the rough. It's good to have a guy who's been around long enough, understands what it takes to be a professional, understands every single day coming to work. That's Kyle Adnam. And very similar story to Sean Bruce, who was out of the league for a few years as well. Came back, wins a couple of championships, the captain of the Kings, and those invaluable veterans. They're hard to come by. That's why teams like to hold on to them.
So there's a little snapshot of everything that's gone on with the free agency options, those that are taken and those that haven't been. As I mentioned, all roads lead to Friday with Marketplace Live starting from 8:30 a.m. You can tune in via the nbl.com.au website, NBL on YouTube, and all of the other social media platforms. Pete, you'll be there. Olgun Ulich will be there. Derek Rucker and I will be there as well. We'll break down everything that happens as it happens on Friday on Marketplace Live. But between now and then, stay up to date with everything that you need to know at nbl.com.au. It's getting closer now, Halls.
Looking forward to it. Can't wait.
We'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us on the Marketplace.